Jennifer Crumbley, the first parent in the U.S. ever charged in connection to a school shooting carried out by her child, has been convicted of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. It comes more than 2 years after Crumbley's son Ethan killed 4 students and injured several others at Oxford High School in Michigan back in 2021. This is the moment that just unfolded in court when the jury returned the verdict.
Of involuntary manslaughter as to Madison Baldwin, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Welcome back to Off the Curb. Big news here in Michigan. Jennifer Crumbley, in a landmark, unprecedented case, found guilty of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Can a parent, in fact, be held accountable for what their kids do in these school shooting scenarios? Apparently, in some situations, yes. Wade Fink, we're bringing you back in. You know, I think you really nailed the analysis of this and some of the reasons why it could end up this way. I think you were not just correct, but correct for the right reasons. What's your initial reaction now that the verdict's here and the dust is starting to finally settle?
You know, I was hesitant to put my foot in the dirt on any particular outcome. I said on your last show that I was leaning towards, a hung jury or guilt, one of the two. Something overcame me though when I heard there was a unanimous verdict. It kind of just dawned on me or hit me, and I said to my wife before we knew that this is guilty. I just didn't see 12 people agreeing on not guilty. I can see a hung jury, but there's so much passion on the guilt side for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is Jennifer Crumbley was not a very likable defendant. But I couldn't see that same level of passion and for unanimity for not guilty. So, I can't say I was shocked once I heard there was a unanimous verdict, but that doesn't lessen the dramatic result or how important it is nationwide.
I think we're in a situation now where now that the dust is starting to settle, you're getting the 2 hard lines in both directions. My personal opinion, I think this was a just result. I think it was a just verdict. I think this was the right conclusion based on the evidence. I thought it was so overwhelmingly negligent to the point where you could argue very strongly that it was causation. I think it was causative. What do you think of the justness of this outcome? Do you think the jury got it right?
Before I start diving in again, is this better? I tried to change my positioning. You
sound good right now. You sound good right now.
Good. Let's hope that remains. Listen, I just on the question of whether this was just alone, aside from the legal analysis and why this resulted or what could have been different, I feel this is completely just as a parent. So let me speak from it personally. When I send my little girl to school, and soon my little boy when he's old enough, and your egregious failings as a human being, your narcissism, your selfishness, and your ability to stop the death of my child is as on such display as it was in this child, this is justice. And whether I was right or wrong in the analysis, and me and you have been covering this for a long time, we were. But this is in addition to being a just result, a good result, it's also a somber moment to remember that 4 children were murdered because of the selfishness and egregious parenting of Jennifer Crumbley and likely her husband too. And I'll leave my mind open to the facts of that one as that trial goes. But as a parent, as a human being, I have no qualms about this conviction. And I think it is shameful the way that she behaved and the selfish nature of her. Don't have children if that's your view on life, that you come first, and not my children that are sharing a school with yours. So I think it's completely just.
I agree. And for all the reasons you stated, and there are sort of 2 prongs to this. There's is it a just outcome? I think we agree there. The other side of this is, okay, forget the just outcome. From a pure Machiavellian strategic standpoint, defense attorney, you said you had your parent hat on. Take it off. Put the defense attorney hat on. The immediate reaction that I'm seeing from legal experts, in the past hour as this just came out was, wow, that testimony was damaging to the defendant. Her own testimony was so self-indicting and damaging and hurtful to her chances at prevailing here. I know that was your initial concern. I know you were none too impressed with Jennifer Crumbley's early performance on the stand. Now that we have a result, am I crazy to say she's guilty, not just because it was a just outcome, but she was found guilty because of the decision to put her on the stand in the first place?
You know, I'd be interested to hear what some of the jurors say if we do hear from them, because, you know, it's always difficult to predict and read tea leaves and give our opinions on what's going on in the black box of the jury room. However, I feel as though my initial gut reaction as a lawyer and what strategy I would have employed, it was correct. And I think that her testimony was a complete disaster. I think that if you were a coin flip to win this case at the outset, you made yourself an underdog by having her testify, because I think that all the problems that you had in your case, none of it could be made better by her testimony. All you could do is undermine yourself and make it worse. And that's exactly what happened by her telling things that just weren't true. And when you go head on into a tremendous amount of evidence showing that you weren't a caring, thoughtful, responsible parent, all of the evidence that you weren't buying the gun, ignoring his cries for help, not taking him home from school, all of those things, and you say you would have done nothing different, that kind of dishonesty does not sit well, I don't think, with a jury, with any human being who's asked to use their common sense as when they come to the table to debate the law and guilt, is use your common sense. So I think it was a tremendous disservice, whoever's decision it was, joint, lawyer, hers, to put her on the stand. And then there was an abundance of self-inflicted wounds that I think continued to lessen the chance of a not guilty verdict. The opening of all the extramarital affairs, opening the door to that as defense counsel, opening the door to attorney-client privilege that showed she was hiding, that she did have some consciousness of guilt, she was running for a reason. All of these wounds, the Taylor Swift comments, the personalizing of the closing arguments, picking on everybody, talking heads like myself and you, who turned out to be dead right at closing argument, making this a personalized vendetta as opposed to a dignified discussion of what the law is and how it should be with regard to parents' responsibility. So long story short, Justin, I'm saying the strategy and the way this trial went, I think, made it much harder for her to win. In my view, had you just let the prosecutor put on her evidence and then stand up and say, look, a lot of that's true, but no person could reasonably foresee their child going on a murderous rampage. Just couldn't. And leave it at, obviously, you know, much more words than that. But that's what, in my view, the strategy should have been.
I agree. But even within that, there's layers. So let's say you do make the decision, I'm going to put my client, the defendant, on the stand. Having made that decision, you should at least structure it right around some concept of remorse, and they're beside themselves, and they just they can't believe that this happened, and they could not be more sorry. And every day they're racking their brain wondering where this went wrong. They didn't do that. So it's like you're making a mistake to put her up there in the first place. But okay, you put her up there. That's the decision as counsel. Don't you think even from that step, they botched it? Because if you're going to put her up there, you can't take a defiant tone. They took a defiant tone, both the defendant and her counsel, where it was like they were mad, like they were being bothered to be there. I mean, they were upset, like we were disturbing them or inconveniencing them by trying this case. It's bizarre to me. Am I crazy?
You're not crazy. And the answer to that question is, if you cannot say those things that you just laid out, right? Like, I'm sorry, it hurts me inside, I would have done a lot of things differently. It doesn't mean that I foresaw this or I was negligent, but hindsight's 2020, that kind of honesty. If you can't do that, then don't testify, right? That's the answer, right? If she, my assumption is she didn't say those things because she doesn't believe them, which is furthers why I have such disdain for her as a mother. because I'm assuming, and maybe it was, I'm not in the attorney-client relationship with her. Maybe there's something more here, but I'm assuming she said those things because she meant them, that she doesn't think she could have done anything differently. And, that passing line of, I wish he would have killed us, was about it, to the extent of her remorse, and whether that was genuine or not, I don't know. But you're not crazy. And I really think that line it sticks with me and will always stick with me, that I look back and I really don't think I would have done anything differently. I got to imagine that sticks with any reasonable juror.
Yeah, you saw a lot of the manifestations of the risks of putting your client on the stand in a situation like this, in the form of opening the door and releasing some of that attorney-client privilege and tone-deaf remarks and responses. All that was part of it. But even taking her out of it and looking at the counsel's strategy, this was not a case of just, I took a risk and my client botched it or flubbed up there.
Which can happen. Which happens right. On self-defense case, times you have to.
Yes. And, you made the proper argument before the trial on why not to put her up there. And we talked about this on my show a little bit together. I can't believe that's one thing. That's bad enough. But it seemed like Shannon Smith's strategy going into this was combative, defiant. So this goes way beyond, I made a calculated heavy risk of putting a client on the stand and it backfired. This goes beyond that. It's like she seemed to, Shannon Smith did, counsel in this case, sit in a room, draft her strategy as being combative and calling out the haters in the media and calling out the haters on social media. And it's bizarre. They struck the exact opposite tone, even from what they planned to say. Prepared statements like the closing statement. That's not a flub. That's not a calculated risk that backfired. That's just poor strategy, right?
I think there were a lot of things that, both stylistically and narrative and strategy wise, that just you cannot square, and I'll never understand them. Taking the tone of making this large, response to whatever they viewed as unfair criticism by the media, by TikTok, and all these things, was not really the tone of that courtroom, and nor should it have been. And frankly, I think that loses the real sympathetic argument that I've seen reasonably made by many people, that, this is slippery slope, it's dangerous, and what other things can parents be held responsible for? Those are all legitimate arguments, but it was done in a way that was inartful, that's just smelled of desperation and selfishness and combativeness and aggressiveness that was never warranted and was never going to be sympathetic in my view. So I agree with you on these strategy calls, and not to mention the things, just the legal errors too, opening the door to all this evidence that never should have come in, and personalizing it in such a way as to kind of be a turnoff. I don't think did themselves any favors.
Speaking of slippery slope, Ben, can you throw up Spartan Williams' tweet? Now, we're not picking on Spartan William. Wade and I both like Spartan William. He's an attorney in the area. I know him. We're friendly. But this is a common line. He said, "This is a scary precedent. You'll never tell me this was anything other than a political case that will be used by the prosecutor to get into politics. I hope to be wrong." Wade, I mean, Karen McDonald, you know the prosecutor in this case, I believe, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. Kind of address both those points. Did you feel there was a political motivation there? Because Spartan Williams not the first one I've seen say that. And secondly, is this a slippery slope case of, oh my God, the door's open at parents and all these cases are going to be screwed now? Or was this case so egregious that doesn't really apply? Can you answer maybe both those points?
Yeah. And actually, it's funny. Spartan William and I had a conversation too in my Twitter inbox, and he's very thoughtful about this stuff. And you need that kind of pushback. That's what makes a good lawyer and hold prosecutors accountable. So, no, I mean, I don't agree with the analysis, but I don't think it's unreasonable. Look, I think Karen McDonald, whether she has other political aspirations or not, is not motivating what went on here. I think this was a unique case for unique reasons. It was uniquely egregious. And at some point there needs to be accountability for others who are responsible for these mass shootings that happen in America. If we're going to be a country where we've made the Second Amendment freedoms a fundamental right and very much restrict the ability to regulate weapons, well, then we need to focus on responsible gun ownerships. And I've seen a lot of that in response from folks who are very pro-gun, saying that they don't have a problem with it because this is what should be encouraged, and that's responsible gun ownership and things along that line. So no, I think that she may have political views and views on what should be, but that's okay. I mean, that's why we elect officials in our country, and I think she has genuinely held beliefs that the parents in this instance with these facts should be held accountable. I don't think she's using that as a stepping stone for higher office. From what I know about her, I think she has those genuinely held beliefs, and I think that's okay for a politician to have genuinely held beliefs and act on them. She told people in her campaign about how she wants to address gun violence. So I don't think that's motivating her. As for the second part of the tweet, and this is, again, another reasonable sentiment I've seen from many defense attorneys, and I've seen from many talking heads and others about the slippery slope argument. You know, even though Jennifer Crumbley is not a sympathetic figure, if she is convicted for conduct committed by her son, well, then what about other parents who did, less wrong, or in circumstances where it really wasn't their fault? Now, could they be held to account? Are they going to be charged? Are they going to have to go through a trial? And my short answer is, that's not an unreasonable concern, and we need to be vigilant about prosecutors who abuse their authority. But I assure you, there are many injustices in the world and many abuses of power by prosecutors across the country that we have to be concerned about. I am not concerned about a slippery slope against parents in this country based on these facts, because these facts are so unique and so out there. I mean, the things that had to go wrong here and had to be done wrong here are so unique. That's why it's the first of its kind, right? Unique facts make unique law. And I understand the concern, but if you're not providing a firearm that's unsecured with access to your child who is showing signs of a mental health crisis, I think you're going to be okay. I don't think there's going to be a mass movement to criminalize parenting or things that should be done differently as parents. I'm not concerned. And I don't think any parent who cares about their children and makes reasonable decisions as responsible members of their community, of their neighborhood, of their schools, I don't think they have anything to concerned about. I'm not.
I want to finish here. The married couple is split apart, separate trials. James Crumbley himself awaiting his trial for the same charges. What do you make of his situation now going in? Because this has to hurt his chances, right? Is he affected in his ability to get a fair trial here? Because he's the one that actually bought the gun. He was sitting in the same meeting with the same principal that the mom was that was used as evidence against her. It seems like he might have difficulty getting a fair shake here. I mean, does he seem maybe pre-damned to you?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it might be a case study in defense strategies of what should be done, what was done in one case and what may be done in another case. I'm curious to see what's going to happen in that trial. And there's some different facts, remember, too, in the dad's case. There's still the operative facts that are bad about the firearm and the meeting. But there's not the same story, I don't think, of text messages and self-interest that may have existed in Jennifer Crumbley's trial. But I don't necessarily think she'd be damned. He's damned because his wife has been convicted, because different jurors, different strategic choices, different arguments, and slightly different facts could certainly lead to a different result. Now, it's certainly informative if you're a defense lawyer and you're looking at this and how this was portrayed and how the proofs came in this case. You're listening and analyzing it, and you might be open to some sort of resolution to avoid substantial time in prison. But at the same time, I don't think it's necessarily means it's unwinnable. I still maintain, and I think I've said this on your show, this will be the third time, this is a winnable case. And I think with certain different choices, it can be won, and maybe that'll happen in Mr. Crumbley's trial. Well, it's yet to be seen.
I believe his counsel is Shannon Smith's partner at the firm, right?
Former. There was an issue over whether there was a conflict of interest, and they split apart to have their own firms, and there were conflict waivers. She's a very talented lawyer, and I think she presents well. And I am interested to see if there are similarities, differences, and strategic choices. But I think I'll just leave it at this. I think if that goes to trial, we'll see a much different tone and tenor in the courtroom.
I do not suspect we'll see James Crumbley on the stand. Is that fair?
Can't see if that decision made. I have a suspicion that it'll be much different tone to his and words to his testimony.
I think they'd be wise to let him sit there and not say a word and let him stare at the wall. Wade, you're the best. I appreciate it. I know you're always busy making time for us here on a whim. We didn't know when this verdict was going to come out, so you made yourself available on a whim for us. We appreciate you as always.
I appreciate the kind words and we both be remiss, and we've said this before. It just makes me feel better to say it. My heart and soul to those parents. I saw one of them speak before the verdict yesterday. There's probably some relief and some, the sense of catharsis in this verdict, but that pain's never going to go away. And that's why, always be mindful, everybody who's talking about this and thinking about this, of just how hard it must be to lose a child.
Yeah, well said. Impossible to, understand unless you've been there, and something no one would wish on their worst enemy, for sure. And well said by you. It's going to be something they always deal with. And I feel bad every step of the way, in the legal process, even they're brought forward and given a voice, and most of them choose to be there, but that's got to be difficult. So yeah, I'm with you there, and hearts out to them. And, we said before, Oxford High School is about 9 minutes from where I'm sitting here in our studio. So certainly hit close to home, and hearts go out to the families involved in this. Just a terrible situation. I do feel like they got a small modicum of justice for the upstream cause of what happened here. So well said by you as always, Wade. I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, guys.
Wade Fink. Ben Augusta, my producer, is always on alert, ready to go. He's the best. You guys are the best too. Appreciate you tuning in. Justin Spiro, Off the Curb. Catch you next time. Thanks.